What is up, fam? It's your boy Paul P. Henny, and this is the One Day at a Time podcast with your boy Paul A. Henderson. And remember, fam, we are coming at you every week. That's right, every week, every Monday. So please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and leave a rating wherever you get your podcast. Also, don't forget to join our Facebook community where we can learn and grow together. Because guess what? I actually want to hear your encouragement, because your encouragement may encourage this brother right here as I'm also in my journey of taking things one day at a time. So fam, the thought that I had today was something that I've actually wrestled with from time to time. And I've gone back and forth and back and forth. And then I've often been reminded of how to overcome what I'm about to share with you right now. That thought is simply this: don't be overwhelmed by the seemingly insurmountable task. Always remember the simplicity of taking things one day at a time. So fam, I was thinking about this because I think all of us at one time or another, we've had a task or some sort of project or there may have been something that's in front of us, and perhaps we've been faced with a sense of being overwhelmed, right? A sense of being overwhelmed, like, how in the world am I going to get this big task done? How am I going to get this large task done? It seems halfway impossible. But I'm always brought back to that thought, fam, of simply learning and remembering to taking things one day at a time. So the question I have is, how do we go from looking at a task as insurmountable to figuring out how to take things one day at a time? So as I've shared with you before, fam, you know I'm a Christian. So a lot of times I do look at the Bible, a lot of times for practical advice. You know, you read the stories and you learn and you learn. For me, I learn about who God is. But at the same time, I'm always looking at practical things as some things that may have happened. And as I thought about this whole deal about an insurmountable task, I was brought back to the story of this guy named Moses. So let's look at where this story with Moses actually starts. And just for a little bit of context, if you want to look at this story of Moses, the Israelites had actually been enslaved in Egypt for about 400 years, actually probably a little bit more than 400 years. And around this time, there were so many Israelites there that Pharaoh was like, look, we got to start killing some of these babies, right? And it was a very mean, a very evil thing that he was doing. So what ends up happening is Moses' mama had Moses. She says, "You not gonna kill my baby." She puts him in the river. He ends up right by where Pharaoh's daughter was bathing. But Moses' sister had actually followed Moses to kind of track where he was going, because she said, "I don't want to see where my little brother's going, so we can figure out a way to possibly get him back," right? So when Pharaoh's daughter saw Moses, and then Moses' sister said, "Hey, you know what? I can actually find somebody to help you nurse this baby." And I love this, y'all, because Pharaoh's daughter basically said, "If you could find me a Hebrew woman or an Israelite woman to nurse this baby, I'll actually take care of her, or basically pay her as she's nursing this baby for me." Think about this, y'all. Moses' mama got paid to nurse him.
Hallelujah.
Moses' mama got paid to nurse him. And I just think that's just an amazing thing. So when he became of age, he ended up, going back with Pharaoh's daughter. He ended up being, raised basically in royalty. Imagine that. He went from being one that was potentially killed to being raised in royalty as an Egyptian, raised in Pharaoh's house. I can only imagine some of the things that he may have experienced, the talks around the dinner table that he may have had with Pharaoh at that time. That's an amazing thing, while somehow still having a relationship with his birth mom and with his birth family. So as we fast forward, there was a time where Moses, I think I can imagine him dealing with some sort of identity crisis, knowing that he was a Hebrew, knowing that he was an Israelite, but at the same time, seeing his people still being enslaved. So one day he saw one of his people being mistreated by an Egyptian, like a slave driver, somebody who was supervising. So Moses kind of looking around, right? He's kind of looking around and he says, I'm going to go ahead and knock this dude out. Not only did he knock him out, he killed the Egyptian guy that was mistreating the Hebrews. He killed him because he said, I got to figure out a way to stand up for my people. And he didn't think anybody saw it, fam. He didn't think that anybody saw it. So the next day, he goes back out there amongst his people, amongst the Israelites. And mind you, he's still living amongst Pharaoh's people at this time. He's still living amongst the Egyptians. So he goes out there, sees two Hebrews fighting, okay, two Hebrews or Israelites fighting back and forth. And he said, hey, man, y'all the brothers, why we got to do this? Why do we got to be fighting, going back and forth? And they say, what you going to do to us? What you going to do? You going to kill us like you killed that guy, the Egyptian guy, yesterday? And Moses was like, oh, shoot. I didn't know that anybody knew anything about that. So what did Moses do? Moses fled. Moses said, I'm going to hightail my tail out of town because apparently people know that I done killed somebody. All right, fam? And I can only imagine how he felt because, mind you, even though he was living amongst royalty, he was still a Hebrew. He was still an Israelite. So he goes out there, and one thing leads to another. He settles amongst the Midianites, and he meets this family. He ends up getting married and actually having his own family, having children and everything out there. And then one day, as he's taking up the life of a shepherd and so on and so forth, he comes across the burning bush, and that was an amazing thing. It was an amazing thing for Moses to experience. A burning bush. But here's part of the message that came from that burning bush. God told Moses at this burning bush what he was going to do. God was going to use Moses to free the Israelites, to go back to Egypt and to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Now, fam, I want you to think about this. Moses, once again, was raised as an Egyptian. And all of a sudden, you go away for a while. You go away for some years to the point where you get married, you have a baby. You got your own family out here now. And all of a sudden, you're going to go back to Egypt, to the leaders of the Israelites, and say, hey, God, I saw a burning bush out there, and I saw God, and he told me to come tell y'all that he want to free y'all, and we about to go talk to Pharaoh to say, let my people go. I can only imagine some of the timidity and some of the nervousness that Moses dealt with at that time. And if I'm honest, I probably would have dealt with it too. Because by this time, once again, he's not living as an Egyptian. He's not even living as a slave, as a Hebrew. He's out with the Midianites in the land of Midians with his own wife from a foreign land, and he has his own son. I mean, what in the world? And then he's going to go back to Egypt, find the leaders of the Israelites and say, hey, God told me we about to be free. I can imagine that he actually probably dealt with some timidity. And I can understand why, right? This is probably an uncomfortable situation for him to be in. So I love what God did, because Moses is like, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't believe me? What if they don't believe that it was actually you, God, that sent me? And I love what God says. Moses had a staff in his hand. God asked Moses, "What's in your hand?" What's in your hand? And I think about that thing. What's in your hand? Moses had the staff. He puts the staff down. The staff actually turns into a snake. Moses, like any of us, especially me as a brother, Moses hightailed, he ran to the other side of the field, right? Because if you think about a staff turning into a snake, it was probably a big snake. You know, if you look at a stick, it probably would have been one of those small snakes that you feel like you could take. But a staff, something long up in your hand, that snake was probably big, right? So Moses said, I'm going to go ahead and run over there, and God, we can have this conversation later. That's not actually what he said, but he did run, right? He did run. And then God said, now Moses, stick out your hand. And as he stuck out his hand, the snake came back into his hand as a staff. I can imagine Moses feeling like, this staff in my hand turned into a snake. I stretched out my hand. This snake turns back into a staff. And there were some other things that God said that, you know, I'm going to do this to prove to your people that I'm actually the one who sent you. Now, when we look at Moses, I can only imagine him going back with that same staff that he's already seen turn into a snake. I can imagine him being a little more confident. Yes, I'm carrying this staff, but I've also seen it turn into a snake. And then I've also seen God allow me to reach my hand back out and it turned back into a staff. Okay, I think we might be doing something here. He goes to the people. He shows the leaders of Israel, the elders of Israel, what happened, and they ended up believing him. So when Moses said to Pharaoh that God said to let my people go so that they can go worship me, and Pharaoh refused and basically almost laughed at him, especially that first time. Like, dude, who are you? You know, who are you? Now, I can imagine they probably had some familiarity because, once again, Moses lived amongst royalty in the earlier part of his life. So I can imagine Pharaoh likely having some familiarity and like, dude, who are you and where have you been? And now all of a sudden you want to tell me that some God, some imaginary God says to let your people go, the people that's taking care of my field, the people that's taking care of my crops, the people that are supporting me, the people that are helping my economy to grow and to flourish. You want me to let them go? Absolutely not. Moses puts his staff down. The staff turns into a snake. And Pharaoh says, well, I got my boys here too. I have my own magicians who can do the same thing. And what happened, fam, was his magicians did the exact same thing. Their staffs turned into snakes as well. But Moses' staff, that had turned into a snake, was able to consume all of their staffs that had turned into snakes. So all of a sudden, we're seeing God showing his power and Moses growing in what? Confidence. You see, fam, it's not just knowing what's in your hand, it's also using what is in your hand. You know what's in your hand, you use what's in your hand, and the end result is confidence, right? Moses grew in confidence because he ended up using what was in his hand. And then there's a series of plague after plague after plague. And I can only imagine Moses growing more and more confident as he continued to use the staff that was in his hand to put plague after plague after plague on Egypt. And telling Pharaoh, let my people go. Okay, you say no, here's another plague. And just about every single time, he used the staff. He used the staff that was in his hand. Eventually, we get to the point where the plagues had gotten so severe and they ended up having this death plague where the firstborn of every Egyptian ended up dying. And they had this whole thing and God gave them a series of things to do. And fam, I love this. I love this. God gave the Israelites specific instructions of what to do, right? He gave them specific instructions of what to do in order to remember. Because this was a high impact, high level, high intensity experience that they were dealing with. I mean, the plague of the frogs, the plague of the gnats, the plague of the flies, the plague of the locusts, the plague of darkness, all of these things that they dealt with. I mean, I can only imagine being there and experiencing these things. And God said, I never want you to forget. So what I want you to do is to create something to help you remember. He gave them specific instructions of what to do in order for them to remember how he delivered his people. So once again, we start with what's in your hand, then you have to use what's in your hand, then eventually you grow with confidence as you're using what's in your hand, and then you have to remember. Once you're starting to have a sense of victory, you have to remember. Establish something to help you remember, because fam, I'm going to tell you something. Even though you remember, even though you've had these great experiences, even though you've learned how to use what's in your hand, and you've gone out there and you've begun to use it and so on and so forth, there's going to come a day where you might experience a bit of discouragement. Things may not always be going as you like or expect. You might find yourself in what some may call a little funk or something like that. And my question for you is, when you get there, what do you do? What do you do? And see, this is why I love what God told Moses, the instructions that he gave him for the people. You have to find a way to remember how I brought you out of Egypt. Because God knew that, yes, even though there's excitement in leaving Egypt, and then you go and you cross the Red Sea, and then it's excitement like, this is so amazing. God also knew that there was a wilderness ahead. And fam, sometimes we get to that wilderness, and it's easy to forget that at one point, we were doing a good job of using what was in our hand. And that's why it's so important to remember. Fam, I was thinking about this. And I was actually thinking, it's like I got my VCU shirt on today, right? VCU, go Rams, go. Oh, let's go. That's where I went to school. That's where I went to school, got my undergrad and master's degree. That's where I ran track and field. And I will never forget, a lot of people became familiar with VCU in 2011. 2011 was the year that VCU went to the Final Four. And I tell you, I mean, in Richmond at that time, it was crazy. I mean, there was such a sense of excitement. Around VCU and the basketball program around that time. But here's the thing, fam. Toward the end of the season, VCU actually lost like 5 of their last 8 games. And I love what Coach Shaka Smart, who was the coach at the time, I love what he did. Rather than fussing at the team and being frustrated with the team, what he did was he compiled a reel, of their highlights from the season. And what that reel did was remind VCU, the basketball team at that time, of successes that they had earlier in the year. He said, this is you. This is you. This is you making this great defensive play. This is you figuring out how to run this play and run it well. This is you figuring out how to use the momentum in order to help us win games. This is you diving for this loose ball. This is you making this great play. He said, guys, what I want you to do is I want you to remember the good moments that you did. Not somebody else. These are things that you did. Guys, I want you to remember. They ended up getting into the NCAA tournament as a first 4 team. They win their first four game, and they ended up making it all the way to the final four. But I really go back to that moment with the head coach, Shaka Smart, at that time, encouraging his guys to remember. To remember. This task may seem insurmountable because we're in the process of a losing streak or losing 5 out of our last 8 games, but I still think that you can do great things. I still believe in you, believe in your abilities, and I believe that we can still do something great. And one day at a time, one game at a time, VCU came back and they win their first 4 game. They won their first round game, the round of 32, the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, and eventually made it all the way to the Final Four. Wow, wow, wow. You see, fam, it all started going back to Moses, was what's in your hand. And here's what I want you to think about. All of us have something that we have accomplished. Whether big or small, all of us have something. We can point back to something or that we have accomplished at one point of our lives. I'm not talking about a major accomplishment. I've written a book. That may not be your thing, right? But what is it that you have accomplished? You know, you may say, Paul, all I ever did was graduate high school. Okay, that's great. You accomplished that, right? Well, Paul, all I've ever done is work retail. Guess what? You've accomplished that. And somebody saw enough in you to hire you and to bring you in to help their organization. What is it that you have accomplished? Fam, what I want you to do is one day at a time, figure out a way that you can build on that. What's in your hand? So fam, as we wrap up today, I want us to remember our process. First and foremost, let's identify what's in our hand. What is in your hand, okay? Once you identify what's in your hand, we have to use what it is that you have in your hand. And as you use what's in your hand, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to grow in confidence. And the more you grow in confidence, make sure you take some time to document the successes that you have, because eventually you'll likely experience some sort of wilderness, some sort of discouragement. And when you get to that point, always remember to go back to your positive experiences. Go back to those victories that you have when you are moving with confidence. And always remember, fam, we are in this together. We are learning, we are growing, and we're using that thing that is in our hand and growing in confidence one day at a time. You got this. Hold on, fam. I forgot something. You might be wondering where I got this staff from, but that ain't none of your business. Just know that I got one. All right? I holler.